Hello and welcome back to this damn Palladialistic Crusade. This video will be a review of Kino Lorber's release of the Selznick-produced 1939 classic Made for Each Other, which is a vehicle for Carole Lombard and James Stewart. This was directed by John Cromwell and written by Jo Swerling, and is generally regarded as a romantic comedy, but really very quickly transitions over into being a melodrama with still some comedy elements interspersed throughout. So it's a sort of odd blending of the two, and it does try and sort of flip between those two modes quite frequently, but it is still an exceptionally strong and very well made film, as was anything Selznick produced, really, but one of the really underrated films of the golden year of Hollywood, 1939, where every film, even if it's more obscure or lesser discussed like this film and not perfect, is still an exceptionally well-made film. Now, the film, as I said, it is pretty much a vehicle for Carole Lombard. Jimmy Stewart was a rising talent at the time. Primarily, Frank Capra had really broken him to stardom after his years at MGM. So this is coming off the heels of You Can't Take It With You, getting into the territory of time period of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And it's interesting seeing him paired with Lombard in a film that is very much trying to get her more, I mean, it's very obvious that it's trying to give her more of a dramatic showcase role. So while it starts like a romantic comedy, because the two characters of the film have a sort of whirlwind romance we don't see, meet one day and then immediately get married, and then have the fallout that happens when other people find out about this whirlwind romance, it quickly transitions away from that. We start getting more and more of reality to set in. So in that sense, it sort of looks forward to more grounded films of this nature. You could even, safely draw a line to the ending of The Graduate, for example, things like that. Or especially, you could even link to Billy Wilder. There's one particular sequence that takes place during a very sad New Year's Eve celebration for the couple, where they then go out to a party and everyone else is partying around them, and they're completely miserable. And I can't help but think of the similar scene at the end of The Apartment between the Fred MacMurray Sheldrake character and Shirley MacLaine's Fran, at that moment where there's this great sort of emotional realization she has. It very much reminded me of that. And of course, it's also photographed beautifully in black and white, so that's another linking signifier there. Again, the film does start as a romantic comedy, and actually quite a good one. Lombard was known for being one of the great screwball heroines, really getting that started with 1934's 20th Century, which is what really made her a star. And after all of the various films she had done and all her attempts at stardom had not exactly caught hold, especially in the pre-code era. So it's 20th Century with Howard Hawks and John Barrymore that really cemented her image. And then, through the various films she would do, like My Man Godfrey and Nothing Sacred, that solidified her as one of the screen icon, screen goddesses, if you will. But she was looking to try and break out of that a bit, and this film is very much evidence of that. And so very quickly it transitions away from the romantic comedy aspects. Those kind of get dialed down, and we get much more into the nitty-gritty of everyday married life, where things happen and life sucks. So, and to be quite honest, it is going to be very, very reminiscent of another film, particularly because it's co-starring Jimmy Stewart. Because of the way it's written, you can't help but think of It's a Wonderful Life. The Stewart character in this film is an aspiring lawyer who's trying to become a partner in his firm, which is run by the great Charles Coburn, but he's just not getting anywhere, and he feels like a complete failure. And it's basically up to his amazing wife to sort of keep his chin up and keep him going and be the sort of motor that drives them forward to do anything. So with the sequences of the Stewart character coming home dejected all the time and being beaten up consistently time and time and time again, you can't help but think of all of the sequences in the middle section of It's a Wonderful Life, showing George Bailey's disintegration into himself, and his self-loathing and depression that drive him to attempt suicide. The reason why it feels so similar is they actually share the same writer, Jo Swerling, who had established a great career writing for the stage and then the screen, had already done things for Selznick, and would actually go on in the same year to do uncredited rewrites on Gone with the Wind. He was the final uncredited writer with Capra on It's a Wonderful Life. So that's why you get that feeling, particularly. It is very much like what you would expect an earlier version. Obviously not the same story, but again, you have Jimmy Stewart being a very similar character at that point in his life, so you can't help but think of It's a Wonderful Life. And the fact that Lombard in this film is absolutely luminous, and you start to kind of get a little frustrated with the Stewart character because he's married to an absolute dear and doesn't understand that his wife is practically angelic, and who needs that promotion anyway. So it reminds me again of It's a Wonderful Life, because again, the Stewart character doesn't realize that he's married to a freaking amazing angelic figure in the Donna Reed character. It's sort of a similar parallel, at least I felt when watching this film. I'd seen it before, but since this is in the Selznick library and it does have that unfortunate public domain status because the copyright lapsed, it has existed in untold amounts of terrible versions, and you can still find terrible versions floating around online or television broadcasts and things. So it's one of those films that's actually quite extremely well made, but you'll usually see it in really crummy looking versions. And the first time you see it, it's probably going to be in one of those, like how I first came across it. And that does unfortunately impact the experience when you don't see a proper looking version. The film was directed by John Cromwell, who had a very interesting career, did a lot of different films in different genres. He would go on to even do one of the Columbia films that Bogart made, which was Dead Reckoning in 1947. My personal favorite of his films, and I think his absolute masterpiece, was also for Selznick, which is 1937's version of The Prisoner of Zenda, starring Ronald Colman, which is the best and truly perfected version of the classic Anthony Hope story, and one of the great swashbuckler films of all time, one of the great adventure films, because it's quite possibly the greatest adventure story ever written. But he had an interesting range. He was not even self-admitted, he was not a visual stylist. He was much more of an actor's director. But in Made for Each Other, it's actually visually quite striking, even though it is a very simple story, and a lot of this stuff would eventually get done to death in terms of being done in television sitcoms and things like that. What makes the film special is how it grounds its story and its characters. So while you do have great humor in the beginning to get you to like, or the audience to like these characters and wish well for them, you can quickly see how reality starts to creep in, and in its best moments when you see their hopeful faces slowly fall and as the realization of what life is going to have in store for them takes effect, and then that just increases your care for them. You wish them well, and then you have to spend the rest of the picture hoping that they manage to actually patch things together. So it's very grounded and realistic in that way, and it has a particular lived-in quality too, because they don't just have immediate success. They have to compromise everywhere. They have to live with the Stewart character's mother-in-law, who drives the Lombard character literally insane. Stewart's character can't become a partner in his firm because they don't take him seriously, and he does all the work. They have to scrimp and save everywhere they possibly can, even though they're, I guess, upper middle class and have a variety of maids that are always quitting. So I guess just sign of the times, I suppose. But it is that particular lived-in quality, and the fact that it allows the passage of time to be felt and the characters have all of these small little intimate moments that speak volumes much more than a screwball set piece or just another setup for laughs or jokes. It has a genuine feel to it, which is I think what makes it truly special. And it's a shame it wasn't more successful at the box office due to a variety of reasons, chief among them the extreme competition of 1939 releases all being life-changing and amazing in the golden year of Hollywood. Because had this film been more successful, I think it would have been easier for Lombard to do more dramatic roles, because this is really a showcase for her. So it is really her movie, and Stewart is there and gives a great performance, but has slightly less screen time, and it's more of well, obviously the story is focused on the Lombard character, and she gets to run the whole gamut of emotions because, as I said, the film starts as romantic comedy. It becomes dramatic slice of life drama of a young newlywed couple. Complications continue to pile on, and then at the end it becomes a full-blown melodrama because, of course, this is still a David O. Selznick production, and that is probably the one issue the film has, because it does feel like it really piles on the melodrama at the end, particularly because Selznick insisted the ending be changed and beefed up to an extreme degree with this whole plot device of the couple's young child falling ill, and then requiring this life-saving serum to be transported across country by plane in the middle of a blizzard. And it's beautifully staged, shot, put together. It's an incredible sequence. It's very riveting, don't get me wrong, but it feels tonally like way to say there's over the top, and there's over the top, and then there's full-blown Selznick in melodrama mode. Famously, he always wanted to do things like this, and people would have to fight him tooth and nail. Hitchcock did on Rebecca, particularly over the film's ending, which Selznick wanted a giant flaming R in the sky over the burning mansion. Wisely, Hitchcock got him to scale that down a bit. So in this film, I think you can definitely feel that. It does sort of take away the focus from the main characters being absolute emotional wrecks at this point. It doesn't derail the film or ruin it or anything, but it does feel very much out of place. And so when you see this and you think that, and then you start looking it up and you see that, oh, well, that's how it happened. It was based on real life events because Selznick did do something similar for his brother Myron Selznick in terms of having to do a emergency flight to essentially save his life with medical supplies. So that sort of gave him the idea, well, heck, I got to use this in a picture somewhere, and then got the idea to put it in this film. Again, it works, but it does feel tonally off, so that's why I think most people might say that the film doesn't quite work, or doesn't have it doesn't feel as satisfying as the first two sections. And it's really, I think, because that sort of thing is so over the top at the end, it feels very much shoved in there or tacked on in a way, which of course it was. I think it would be fascinating to see the film as originally shot and written without that material. I don't know that necessarily it would be better, but I think probably it would play a little bit better because it would keep that sort of intimate focus. But again, it's a very remarkable film because of the way it feels lived in and grounded. For example, there's one scene where the Stewart character comes back late at night, dejected once more, and Lombard as his wife, they wakes up and she's always trying to drive them forward, and she's the one with the positive outlook, or at least as positive as humanly possible with the things that keep stacking up against them. But instead of just talking in their darkened bedroom or anything, like any normal person at 2:00 in the morning or whatever the hour is that he comes home, he's a little hungry, so they wander into the kitchen and she pulls out some leftover chicken, and they're just sitting there gnawing away on chicken bones as they're still talking. And again, it has this sort of slice of life authenticity to it that I think really sells it and makes you care about these characters all the more. And of course, it's beautifully shot and put together, and it has the full Selznick seal of quality all over it. And it's got a lot of little surprising bits to it that you don't quite expect. In particular, when Lombard's character is giving birth, and we see Stewart in the hospital having a sleepless night, he wakes up in panic, and there's essentially a scene straight out of a horror film as he's running around the darkened, fully expressionist corridors of the hospital. So it doesn't just do straight marriage melodrama and with bits of romantic comedy mixed in. There's all kinds of other little bits that are very much unexpected, but truly welcome, because it makes it a bit more interesting, obviously, but it gives it a greater range. And you truly come to care about these characters. But to say that Carole Lombard is luminous in this film is an understatement. She's the definition of the word in this film, and you can definitely get that sense of her wanting to sink her teeth into a meatier part or something that was different from screwball comedies to, again, try and expand her screen image in terms of showing off her acting range. And she's incredible in this film. She gets some great showpiece moments, but the best ones are the small pieces of the film where it's her and the Stewart character interacting, and frequently with little to no dialogue, and what they do and their mere glances speak volumes, and it feels very much lived in and realistic, which is, I think, why this film it has such a timeless quality to it, even if it's not perfect and it does have that very extreme melodrama towards the end. So again, it's a mix of genres. It doesn't quite work all the way through. It does feel a little rough here and there, but it doesn't overstay its welcome, and it has such an inherent humanity to it that I think really does look forward to It's a Wonderful Life, which would be 7 years later down the road. So it's a must for Stewart fans. It's an absolute must for Carole Lombard fans. And of course, if you love films that Selznick produced, obviously this is one of his great films of 1939, but of course is overshadowed by Gone with the Wind, as was practically everything else. And you even have Jo Swerling working on this film and then doing some uncredited rewrites on Gone with the Wind, because if you work for Selznick, you worked on Gone with the Wind somehow, some way, probably without credit, because of course the film seemed like it was never going to end, and he was always getting people to tweak it or do extra things on it. So it's no surprise that Swerling wound up doing some writing work on Gone with the Wind. So it's actually, I think, an incredible little film that should be talked about more, and I think its public domain status in terms of being stuck in terrible, cheapy, awful-looking versions has sort of hurt its reputation, because if people are aware of it or if they see it, it's going to be in one of those crappy versions, and so they may not think that it's know of its pedigree that it has, and so it doesn't quite get that respect it deserves. So that brings us to the 2018 Kino Lorber Blu-ray with this rather striking and lovely art. This unfortunately is out of print from Kino. If you go on their website, you'll find the listing and you can buy it on DVD, but they don't sell the Blu-ray any longer. However, other retailers still offer it for sale, so this will be a Kino title you'll have to track down somewhere else, because unfortunately the disc is out of print, which is a shame because this is credited as an HD scan of a 2K scan of the restored fine grain itself. It is by far and away the best I've ever seen the film, and it is a newer protection master made of this film. It is not fully restored. It's not a 4K restoration with every blemish gone, so you will notice the occasional bit of speckling. There are one or two bits of very fine, thin lines. I noticed one or two hairs here and there sort of creeping in the corners, but all of these are very small and at a relative minimum, so that's understandable. But still, it's the best I've ever seen the film look. And because it's a Selznick title, that means it's under Disney, and that means that this going out of print already And the fact that it's in the public domain, nobody's going to spend money on titles like this, unfortunately, unless there's a reason to, for in terms of looking at monetary values on a page. So I don't see this getting another physical media release anytime soon, which is a shame because it's a much better film than you would think, and it really deserves a greater reputation. So this is the best release the film has ever gotten. It has lossless DTS HDMI mono, which sounds pretty good. Has nice general hiss to it here and there. That's natural, I should say. But it is a fine presentation, even though the master itself does, obviously show some bits of damage and wear that's baked into the source element. Again, this was not given a full 4K restoration where they went through and restored every single frame. But don't let that deter you, because this film has had a history of horrible transfers, just like Nothing Sacred, just like the 1937 A Star is Born, and unfortunately a lot of other Selznick films. And this one is in the public domain, and so you will see it online in a number of horrible looking versions. And this is a beautifully photographed film, so you want to see it in as best quality as possible, which you have to get this Kino release for. It does include some extras. We get the original trailer, which is in HD, which looks quite nice, and then we get an audio commentary by Lee Gambin. I've heard a number of his tracks before, and unfortunately this one doesn't really differ from those very much. I do listen to every commentary for when I watch a film. I do enjoy commentaries very much. I consider myself a bit of a commentary geek. And there are ones where you very quickly realize that you can kind of just turn your brain off and listen to the rest of it because you're not getting anything out of it, or ones where you simply want to turn it off. Basically, this commentary track is for the most part Gambin talking about things that he likes and a little bit about each of the players, but basically in just generalities and things that you would know if you just read the Wikipedia article or you looked them up on IMDb, or general stuff you already knew. So it doesn't really have a lot of factual content, and the only little bits of trivia that are about the film that you might not know are on the IMDb trivia page. So again, if you read the film's IMDb page and you looked at the few bits of trivia, you're not going to get anything out of this commentary track. So unfortunately, it was a very disappointing listen. The only real tidbit that you might have not considered that is good about this commentary is Gambin does bring up the point that in Lombard's personal life, she had great difficulty in terms of having children, and so playing a new mother in this film obviously must have had great emotion for her to actually play, due to the troubles she had in her own personal life. But if you had read a little bit of biography about Lombard, you probably could have figured that out yourself too. But still, it's not terrible, but it's just I didn't get anything out of it, and that's how the same experience I've had with Gambin's other tracks, like on the Shout release of Murder by Death. So at least it's got a commentary. I know I feel like I'm complaining, but it's not a very good one. But at least there's something for this film, which does deserve some extras. I just wish the commentary was better. So that's my review of Kino's Blu-ray release of Made for Each Other, a real Selznick classic that unfortunately has the same public domain status and terrible release history as a good number of other Selznick titles do. This is the best release the film has ever gotten. It does have a very nice new 2K scan from a protection element, and unfortunately it's out of print, so I do highly encourage any fans of classic Hollywood, but particularly fans of Selznick titles, James Stewart fans, and most particularly Carole Lombard fans, track a copy of this down. I think it's still available on Amazon and some other retailers, so it's not quite fully out of print in terms of it's disappeared from all retailers, but it is one of those, like Portrait of Jenny, for example, another Selznick title that's out of print from Kino, that you will have to track down on Amazon or eBay, or if you somehow found it in a local store. But it is really worth your time, and it's a prime example of one of those great great 1939 classics that's not necessarily in the top A tier with the legends like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Gunga Din, Only Angels Have Wings, Gone with the Wind, and so on, but a sign of why it was the golden year of Hollywood, because every film was timeless, it seemed, whether it was a lesser-known Selznick film like this or Republic doing one of its masterpiece serials. Every film or every release of 1939 seems to have had that magic touch to it, as does this film, Made for Each Other. So it is an out-of-print Kino title that I do highly recommend, and again, I think it's going to be unfortunately the best release this film is ever going to get on video until somebody decide, well, I should say until Disney decides to do a 4K restoration of their Selznick titles. So it's a nice little gem. It does have some rough edges. It does sort of mix and match between genres, but it's a real gem from 1939. So I hope this has been informative and at least somewhat fun to listen to me babble on about more classic films. And I do hope, if you haven't checked this out already, that you're able to find a copy, since it's no longer sold on Kino's website. Because again, it's the absolute best I've ever seen the film look. So that was a real treat. Plus, it has original poster art, so that always helps. So as always, keep your disc spinning. Keep physical media alive by supporting studio labels and boutique labels, and thanks ever so much for watching.